Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up ERPA AI, and welcome to another installment of the Voice of the Customer interview series. I'm joined today by Matthew Kelly. He's the former SVP and Global Head of Digital Transformation and Intelligent Automation from Northern Trust Corporation. Matthew, great to be with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure. So before we jump in, maybe just give us a little bit of your background and details of your previous role.
Wow, yeah. So I joined Northern Trust a few years ago, really at an intersecting point where they're thinking through how they could enhance productivity, how they could drive innovation, and how they could ultimately change the employee experience. So coming in and being responsible for digital tools for the employee experience, intelligent automation, RPA tools, low code tools, data visualization in many cases to support client reporting activities and other things. So that was my role, and was very proud to help lead and navigate the organization through a great period of change, from personnel and technologies and platforms to new leaders. So yeah, excited.
No, interesting. So I'm always curious as to, how these journeys start, Matthew. Was there a particular problem in mind, or, did somebody, see something about RPA, or, listen to one of my guys speak? Like what prompted the journey there?
It's interesting. I think for many organizations, it is thought leaders coming from the Gartner, coming from McKinsey, coming from Bain, and starting the conversation around intelligent automation, starting the buzzword around hyper automation
Yeah.
and RPA, right? And I think we're seeing something similar with generative AI, but it happens in the thought leader space, and then C-level executives kind of get a hold of that language and get interested in the promise of the tool, the technology, and then build a team around that, right? And so I joined an organization that was really excited about how they could enhance productivity by leveraging intelligent automation, by transforming the way their operating model worked with artificial intelligence and machine learning.
These things always work better when it comes from the C-suite. So when you joined, they were already kind of involved in it, or at least considering intelligent automation.
So the program had started in our shared services center in India, and our site head, Ravi Gantham, shout out to Ravi, had been a real champion for intelligent automation, and partnered with UiPath very, very early on to start to automate tasks that were occurring in our site in India. And so he got it to a point where it was no longer just him, no longer just the team in India, but the opportunity to broaden the impact to front, middle, back office, and so I was brought in to lead that effort. Simultaneously, you had the pandemic. Also in our organization, we were going through replatforming of some of our core internal um, you know, transaction systems. So all of these things were happening at once, and they were saying, what is a way that we could start to bring these different technologies together? How can we close some of the white space that we're experiencing with this new platform, and drive further efficiencies in the organization? And so there was a strong conviction that intelligent automation was one of the levers to pull to help us get there.
So how did it go? Right. I mean, I feel like there's always this excitement period, and then there's this letdown period, and then there's like a coming to Jesus reality moment, and then people kind of get out of neutral. Was that kind of
It,
your experience?
I think in many cases it follows the path of the hype cycle, right? So, where you get really excited about kind of what the future could be, and then at some point you find yourself in the valley of despair, right? I would say for us, the journey was not without challenge, but there was along the way a lot of, again, I use the word conviction, a strong belief that intelligent automation could be part of the solution. Right? There was a strong conviction that if only we focused on the right things, the right use cases, the right processes, that it would yield us this massive productivity gain that someone had promised long back. And, did it achieve productivity gains? Yes. Was it all that someone else had promised? Probably not. Um, does that mean that the program failed or not at all? The program continues with great momentum, great support, great investment, and it is at a pivot, right? How does it? And I think the pivot is very much in line with the pivot of RPA tools and other companies as well. It is, what space does RPA play in when I have these big data platforms? What space does RPA play in when I'm maturing my microservices architecture? What space does RPA play in when we are um, maturing as an API first type of organization? And what is the value of RPA capabilities when that white space that previously existed between systems and processes is further reduced by their greater capabilities, right? Where does RPA fit? Does it fit as a task mining tool? Does it fit as a low code, no code solution? Does it fit as, a deployment mechanism for machine learning and next best actions? Um, I think these are challenges that the industry and other practitioners and organizations are struggling with.
So, what were the biggest surprises or challenges that popped up, and curious as to how you guys overcame them?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenges are usually cultural, um, and not necessarily technological,
Sure.
right? So when we talk about culture, we talk about kind of some of the ingrained behaviors, right? The ingrained reward systems, and I'll go a step further. The ingrained way, our common model of governance and how we oversee certain programs of work. And I think in many cases, um, where you have governance structures that may not fully understand the capability of the tools, right? And the effort to bring them along with you needs to be balanced against the effort and execution, right? So, do we spend more time uh, communicating or executing, right? And I think it is a constant balance and a constant negotiation between those two things.
What I love about where we are right now as an industry is, this, regardless of whether you call it intelligent automation or hyper automation, we're finally kind of gluing all these different pieces. Before, you mentioned big data before, which was kind of something that was interesting like years ago, and then kind of went away, at least in my radar, and now is kind of come back. What do you see as kind of the next wave of activity, or maybe a better question is, are there particular outcomes or solutions that you see, that are a reality today that maybe weren't a reality 3 years ago?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is where I mentioned generative AI, right? And this is, um, one of the products that we piloted was a tool called Aria, and Aria is natural language generation, basically taking data and converting that to summary or story or whatever kind of output that you want. And I thought that was incredibly powerful, right? I mean, if you think about, even in finance functions across every industry where you're writing variance analysis, where you're writing some kind of narrative to explain numbers that people may only give a cursory glance to. There's a lot of productivity to be had, and also I think new capabilities, new insights that can be gained from converting that data into a narrative in an efficient and predictable way. So we did some really cool things with that. I feel like um, you know certainly the ARIA product will continue to mature, leveraging large language models. You're starting to see bespoke or industry specific large language models coming out of Broadridge. I'm financial services, so that's what I know. Broadridge coming out of Bloomberg. I believe FactSet as something that they're working on. So I think all of these solution providers, technology providers are looking at ways to integrate large language models into their offerings, as well as kind of predictive next best action um, into their offerings as well.
Yeah, the next best action thing is very interesting to me. I feel like organizations historically have really focused on servicing customers and solving problems for customers, but not necessarily thinking about how to take all those interactions and turn them into additional revenue or just
Right.
loyalty types of things. And then the pandemic happens, and I think brand loyalty is under attack right now. I mean, we all kind of go to whatever is the most convenient
Right.
these days. So what do you see over the next coming months, just as an industry? Any other things that you're excited about?
I would say I'm excited about new talent, right? As we've seen some of the layoffs across the technology space, we have seen also an influx or an opportunity to grab new, what I call emerging talent, emerging leaders, people that on one hand may not have considered financial services, and on another hand we may not have really considered them, for any number of reasons. So that that gets me excited. That's encouraging to me because I think as you see a new influx of thinking and new perspectives, I think that will really spurn the industry forward. And from an RPA perspective, I think they will come with use cases and applications of tools that we haven't really thought about before, right? I think there are people who are picking up the low code, no code toolkit as a pivot from what they may have been doing before, and are bringing a whole host of experiences along with them in that journey. I think that's also true in the analytics space. As tools become easier and easier to use, that talent will ultimately meet us there with new way of thinking and new applications.
Matthew, what's your advice as someone who's been there and done that? What's your advice to someone who's leading an intelligent automation practice or a COE right now and is just struggling with the ROI or struggling with getting to scale? What's your advice?
I would say the very first thing is communicate. And I have a couple people in this industry that I have great relationships with. Couple people in RPA and intelligent automation and great relationships. And I think the learning that I've had, that many people I know that are doing innovative things in whatever industry, is communicate. Communicate. However good of a communicator you are, like invest more. Um, you know, is the first hire your technical architect who's going to do, amazing things? Is that your first hire? Or is it someone that's going to help you craft a story and continue to communicate broadly in the organization? And I think some of the same things that we we need to practice what we preach when we talk about it's not the technology, it's the mindset. Well, if that's true, why did we spend so much time talking about the technology, right? If that's true, why do we invest so much in the technology versus investing in the change management, investing in the adoption? And I think what my peers need to hear is you can almost not overinvest in communication, right? It's almost impossible to overinvest in communication, in change management. And even if that is at the expense of the next cool tool that you want to buy, or the next, you know, technical hotshot you want to hire, invest in the communication, invest in the change management, invest in telling a story, because I think that will get you places your ROI won't get you. Right. So even when you start to cobble together an ROI that looks like 3x, right? And you might feel really excited about that. But if you're in certain industries and you have an internal rate of return that's at 7.5, right? Like, that may not be, as people are scanning the horizon on where they're going to invest capital,
Yeah.
you may not be the spot. And you know, again, as some of the tools get better and better, they also become more expensive, right? And the operation of those tools become more expensive. So it's almost like you're not scaling up from a value perspective, but the cost of value delivery is continues to grow, right? So we need to change the economic model. And I think part of that comes with, I'm gonna go back to communication and engaging a broader stakeholder community than just your finance team in Bangalore,
Yeah.
right?
Interesting. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, and hopefully, if you allow us, we'll check in with you again in a few months and see where you land.
So we'll see what happens. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for everyone who joined us.
My pleasure, Matthew. Thank you.
All right.